Remember just a couple of years ago, it felt like everyone was quitting their job. The Great Resignation, right? It felt like this big declaration of freedom. But now, wow, that feels like ancient history. Today, we're going to dig into a massive shift in the world of work, a feeling of being stuck that goes way, way deeper than just your job. Okay, so let's just look at this. The pendulum has swung like all the way to the other side. A few years back, workers had the power, right? Jumping to new jobs, getting better pay, finding new opportunities. But today, we're seeing a whole different thing, job hugging. It's exactly what it sounds like. People are holding onto their jobs for dear life. It's a total switch from confidence to just caution. And this isn't just a vibe, you know? The numbers absolutely back this up. What you're seeing here is the US quit rate. It's basically how we measure worker confidence. And look at it. It has just plummeted, all the way back to where it was before the pandemic even started. People are staying put, period. So what does job hugging really mean? Well, it's not some sudden explosion in company loyalty, that's for sure. It's a survival instinct. It's driven by economic jitters, fear about AI, and a job market that's, well, it's just not as hot as it was. It's a sign of fragility, not satisfaction. This feeling of being stuck, this kind of paralysis, it makes you wonder, is this just a short-term thing, a reaction to the economy, or are there deeper, maybe structural forces going on here that are making it harder for all of us to make a change? Well, it turns out there's a huge, almost invisible barrier that's been growing for decades now, and it makes it incredibly hard for people to switch careers. Let's pull back the curtain on something called the occupational license trap. Just look at this graph for a second. Back in the 1950s, only about 5% of American workers needed a government license to do their job. Think about that. Now, fast forward to today, that number has ballooned to over 20%. That's 1 in every 5 workers. This is a massive, massive change to how our economy is structured.
So what is occupational licensing? Basically, it's when the government says you have to get a specific license to work in a field. We all know the obvious ones, like doctors and lawyers, but in some places, this applies to florists and interior designers, too. The goal is supposed to be protecting consumers, but a major side effect is that it builds these huge walls around different professions. And this has a real direct impact on you. Research shows that if you have one of these licenses, you are 24% less likely to ever switch to a different line of work. That's huge. I mean, all the time, the money, the training to get that license, it basically locks you into a career path.
And this isn't some small thing. When you look at the whole economy, it adds up. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, this rise in licensing could explain almost 8% of the entire drop in people switching jobs over the last 20 years. All these individual traps create a much less dynamic economy for everyone. Okay, so let's put this together. We have job hugging driven by fear on one side, and on the other, we have these real-world barriers like occupational licensing. But what if both of these are just symptoms of something much, much bigger, a huge cultural shift? What if we as a society have somehow chosen to be stuck? And this is where we get into a really big, kind of mind-blowing theory from the economist Tyler Cowen. He argues that we've become what he calls the complacent class. Basically, a society that has, for very rational reasons, decided to trade dynamism for safety and comfort. Here's the paradox at the heart of this whole idea, and it's what makes it so powerful. You and me, we all try to make our lives safer, more predictable. That makes perfect sense, right? It's rational. But when millions and millions of us do that at the same time, the collective result is a society that stops taking big risks, that innovates less, and that actually becomes more fragile in the long run. And the evidence? Cowen says it's all around us. First, just look at our businesses. The rate of new companies starting up has fallen. There's less churn. The big old companies are just getting more and more entrenched. And the really big one, productivity growth, the engine of a better standard of living, has been pretty sluggish for decades now. Second, we've literally stopped moving. The rate at which Americans pick up and move to another state for a new opportunity has been cut in half. We've become physically stuck in our ways, and we've basically outsourced that kind of risk-taking, moving to a new place for a better life, to immigrants. And third, we've all retreated into our own little bubbles. We live near people who make about the same amount of money as we do. We watch news that just confirms what we already believe. Even our technology, dating apps, job sites, you name it, is designed to match us with what's familiar, which just reinforces our separation from each other. And this quote from Cowan just nails the trade-off we've made. He says, look, we've made our lives safer and more comfortable in a lot of ways, and that's not a bad thing. Our cities are calmer, but the price we've paid is this inward-looking mentality, one that's focused on managing risk instead of building a bigger, brighter, more glorious future.
Wow, so that's a pretty sobering thought. If we've built a society that's so focused on avoiding risk that we become stagnant and stuck, how does this story end? I mean, can we just stay like this forever?
Well, according to Cowan, probably not. This era of complacency isn't likely to last forever. He sees two main ways this could all play out, two very, very different futures.
Okay, so on one hand, you have the Great Reset. This is a sudden, painful shock that forces us to change. On the other hand, you have the Quiet Revolution, a much more gradual escape, powered by new technology that kind of pulls us out of this rut. One is chaotic, the other is innovative.
So what is this Great Reset? Cowan calls it a Minsky moment for all of society. That's an economic term for when a long, stable period suddenly leads to a huge collapse. It's a massive crisis that our rigid, complacent society just isn't flexible enough to deal with. It could be a debt crisis, a big war, a total breakdown in government. It's the moment the bill for our lack of dynamism finally comes due. But then there's the much more hopeful path, the Quiet Revolution. This is the idea that new, powerful technologies, things like AI, huge breakthroughs in biotech like the mRNA vaccines, green energy, finally hit their full potential and kick off a brand new wave of progress and growth, basically innovating us right out of stagnation. But, and this is a huge but, there's a fascinating kind of scary twist even in the good scenario. What if the fastest progress we make is in biotech, letting us all live much longer? Could that actually make society as a whole older, more set in its ways, and even more resistant to change? Is it possible we could accidentally innovate ourselves into an even deeper state of complacency?
And really, that's the big question we're left with, isn't it? In our very rational, very human search for safety, for security, for stability, have we unintentionally created a world that's less mobile, less innovative, and ultimately just stuck? Have we accidentally engineered away the very dynamism that makes everything better?